Welcome to the Boom Bap Kingdom. Peace, and welcome back to the Boom Bap Kingdom. It's been a minute. I've been gone for a little while. I've been busy. I'm going to school, trying to finish up this degree. I've been making a lot of beats, and overall just chilling, and was trying to enjoy the wrap up of the summer and leading into the fall. If you guys have been following me, you see what I've kind of been doing is just kind of doing a little bit of a round robin of the machines that I currently own, what I was working with the most at the time. And that first video, I believe, was the SP1200 from Hilo. And then I kind of just made my way around, but I wanted that number 10 video to be special. That machine is my MPC60. I'm the original owner of this MPC60. I just wanted to talk about the Akai MPC60, Roger Lynn, and its legacy and the impact that this machine had in hip hop and boom bap, production, and the legacy that it continues to have, the impact that it continues to have. So, believe it or not, for this video, I actually had a conversation with Roger Lynn through email, and he was gracious enough to hit me up and get back to me, right? And so we were just chopping it up through email, and I actually have that email, conversation right here. And I needed to understand a couple of things, because when you jump into the hot tub time machine and you think about hip hop and you think about 1988, right, where sampling was just becoming a thing. It still wasn't, a lot of cats really didn't know about it yet, right? You had dudes on a 808 programming drums, a DJ, just kind of cutting and scratching to the drums. They might have let some stabs go, classic records like Rock the Bells from LL and, Peter Piper with Run DMC, and you could hear that was just a drum machine, and either cut creator for Cool J or rest in peace JMJ for Run DMC. They were cutting and scratching in time with the drum programming, the pattern. Roger Lynn released the Lynn drum, right? That came out in 1982, right? And then they manufactured that Lynn drum for about 3 years. That lasted till about 1985, right? Then you had Emu dropping that SP12. That dropped in 85, right? Roger Lynn released the Lynn 9000 in 84. So then SP12 drops, you could sample on that. And then in 87, the SP1200 dropped, right? And then in 88, the MPC60 dropped. So let's talk about the specs of the 60 when it was released, right? So in 1988, you had 16-note polyphony. So if you know what polyphony is, that means you could play multiple sounds up to that amount at the same time, right? So you could play 16 notes simultaneously. The SP1200 gave you 8. The memory originally was 768 kilobytes. That gave you 13.1 seconds to the 1200's 10 seconds, right? Now, you guys are probably laughing like, yo, what is 3.1 seconds? Like, how, trust me, son, back in 88, 89, 1990, yo, 91, 92, all the way up to 94. Like, that 3 seconds, that made a huge difference. A huge difference. And that's where you get the techniques of sampling at 45, pitching it down, then you get the artifacts and these techniques were out of necessity because these machines didn't have the sample time they have now. Sadly, no filters, right? No filters on the MPC60. And obviously the 1200 had filters, so that made the 12, in my opinion, a little doper for that, because in early Boom Bap, we would be sampling stuff and no one was really chopping yet, you know what I mean? A lot of people were still kind of using loops. Nobody was super creative at the time. But one thing was dope was Boom Bap producers were starting to realize you needed bass lines in your song. You couldn't just have drums. So we would take those loops and then we'd run them through the low pass filter, and that gives you that iconic Boom Bap bass line sound, right? And you couldn't do that on the 60. So at that point, you would MIDI up a keyboard and then play a bass line from that. You could run your sample through EQs and just take all the mids and the highs out, bump up all the lows, sample that into your 60, and you had a similar effect. So the filters, it wasn't necessarily a deal breaker, but again, right, when you're on standalones, you come up with creative workarounds. I used to flip it, and I did something that I called a feedback bass. And if you hold a needle on a record a certain way, you could make a feedback noise almost like a sine wave, like that. And I would sample that and then play that in 16 levels. When you look at other machines, everybody has adopted the rubber pads. Everybody is trying to mimic that MPC60 sequence swing. I mean, that swing in the 60 is iconic. You know what I mean? And you have other machines that they do it nice, they do it well, but the 60, the 62, and the 3000, that swing on that sequencer is incredible. And honestly, for me, that's why I copped one, because I was actually an Ensoniq guy, right? That's why I learned to chop up samples. Initially, it was on Ensoniq. But I had a very serious limitation of making my own drum patterns. I heard the EPS and the EPS-M, and those were really hard to make your own drum patterns. So what I was doing was just chopping up breaks and kind of layering them to get a different, sound. Imagine putting Impeach the President, on top of substitution drums, right? And then pitching it, and it just comes out its own weird drum pattern, Back in the days, I was doing that kind of stuff until I got the MPC60. And once I got the 60, that's when I realized, like, oh, snap, I could sample individual kicks, snares, hi-hats, right? Says and make my own drums. That's crazy, and then you can layer samples, which was also crazy. So in the 60, I know what I do ever since the 60 is, layering drums. It's not one kick, that's two. It's playing together at the same time. Just slightly pitch them, they sound like one. A little bit more punchy and thick, right? Same thing with the snares, right? One snare, but then you have another snare, you layer them, pitch them, and they sounds like one snare, but it's cracking hard, it's hitting harder, And so those were, those tricks, man, we started early with that. 1990, you know, we're doing these tricks of chopping stuff up, layering, and that was because of, you know, the machines of the era. The MPC60 has its own signature sound, and it is very warm. It's I mean, I love the 60. I knew a lot of guys were using the 60 for drums, and they would use the S950 for the rest of their samples. And that's what a lot of 1200 guys started doing. They would use the 1200 just for the drums, and all the other samples would be on the S950. Plus, you could filter on the S950. So it made sense to kind of, you know, for a 60 guy to marry the S950 and the 16 levels. I think the 16 levels was, that was a game changer too, because now you could actually take a chop and start playing it. I was super curious about his intention, right, with the machine and what it became. So what I wanted to know most was the record in port. I asked Roger Lynn, like, what did you think people would actually use that port for? And his response was basically he thought musicians would sample themselves, right? So I would imagine that's maybe guitarists or, you know, whatever, keyboardists, you know, whatever. But people chopping up vinyl, it was definitely not on the radar. So at any rate, I did make a beat on the 60. I actually made 2 beats. I just kind of like this one a little bit more. So this is the beat that I'm gonna play and talk about. Obviously, I sampled, you know, my kicks and my snares and hi-hats. I made a hook. You'll know it when you hear it. If you don't, you need to do a little research. What I did was I created a loop and I sampled my own loop. So I actually played that and I sampled it into this guy. Listen how warm it is. And I want to say I might even pitch that. I did. No, I didn't pitch that. What I pitched was the hook. A nice little chop on the sax. Another chop, sax. That's actually pitched. So if we put it to its normal pitch, and then we put it to my pitch, okay. Another sax, just raw. And all of the sample editing is done with numbers. I'll actually film, you know, a little of what that looks like. I'll have that in the video. There was no waveform editing in those days, right? And I personally believe that makes you a better producer or beat maker because you have to rely on your ear more as opposed to moving a cursor or playhead across a wave file. You're actually just looking at numbers that really don't mean a whole lot to you. So with that being said, you're just listening. Like you're literally turning the jog wheel, and you know you're looking for the perfect point, you know, based on what you hear. So what else is in here? Bass line. Those are all the samples, and I'm gonna give you guys the beat. All right. So big shout out to Roger Lynn. Big shout out to Akai, right? And a big shout out to all the MPC heads out there, man, because you know you have a strong argument to say, yo, this is where you know, it really began to take off, you know, with the 60. Let's play the beat. Boom Bap Kingdom signing off. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Let's go. I'm trying to get 1,000 subs. All right, let's get 1,000. All right, we can get there. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, share. That's important. Tell a friend to tell a friend, man. I'm here putting in the content, you know, giving you guys the raw, the real, the official. All right. Boom Bap Kingdom salute.
Salute.